Hi guys, welcome to Let's Get Mathy. Today we're going to talk about Unit 1, Lesson 2, Function Analysis, and we are going to be examining graphs for key characteristics. So this is our first example, which I've broken down into numerous slides. Uh, First attribute of the function that we want to look at are the zeros. Zeros are essentially a synonym for x-intercepts and also roots. There are some distinguishing factors, but for students coming out of Algebra 1, you will remember these as x-intercepts. So if we look at this graph, we can see that we have two x-intercepts. One is at -6, one is at 6. So you have two values here, 6, 0, as well as -6, 0. So I ask you guys to ponder, why do you think they're called zeros? Moving on to our next attribute, we're going to be looking at maximum or minimum values, commonly called max or mins. So if we look at this graph, you want to examine if you have a top of a peak or the bottom of a valley. You may have a situation where you have both, but in looking at this graph, you can see over here that you have a maximum value because it's at the top of the peak here at 6. So you want to read closely the questions. If they're asking you for the local or maximum point, you would write that as an ordered pair, 0, 6. If they're asking for the value, the maximum value, that is only the y value of the point. So the maximum value in this situation is 6, but the maximum point is 0, 6. We're going to move on now to two sets of attributes. The first is going to be distinguishing between increasing or decreasing intervals. The next one will be determining between positive or negative values of the function. So in looking at this, notice here that we're now looking for an interval. So the notation we have been using for domain is going to be utilized here. Your answers will reflect the domain. So in the past, students have been a little confused about whether to write the x values or the y values. Your answers here will always come from the domain, which is again the set of x values. So if we look at this graph, we can see that the function is going uphill. So again, going up from left to right. From up, we see an arrow. What do arrows imply? Infinities. So we have a negative infinity over here. So on the number line here, it's going from negative infinity up. And notice at that maximum point, it's changing. So it's changing here at 0 to then decreasing. So the interval on which the function is increasing is from negative infinity to 0. Similar with decreasing, it is going downhill from that point, that maximum point, to, another arrow, positive infinity. Now notice in my solutions that I did not include the equals to's. It does not include the maximum value, and you are going to have lots of fun learning about that in calculus classes in years to come. Our final attribute that we're going to explore is, when is the function positive, when is it negative? It is possible for it to be a combination or only positive or negative. In this graph here, we can see that using the graph characteristic above the x-axis, so we can see, if I draw or a highlight here, the x-axis, this portion from here to here is above the x-axis. Now notice this connects into your zeros. So that's why I started off with zeros and maximum, because it's going to help you in your answers with increasing, decreasing, as well as positive and negative. So the function is positive between its two zeros or x-intercepts. So it's positive from -6 to +6. Now notice it doesn't include it again. That's because if you think about 0, is it positive or negative? It's neither. So that's why it's not included, because at 6, the function is 0. Now negative is where it's below the x-axis. So I'm going to do this in a different color to distinguish. So if we look at this, this is where the function is negative because it's below the x-axis over here and below the x-axis over here. So we're going to get into a little bit of new notation for you. We are going to be using the union symbol because the domain, I got arrows, right? So it's going to go from -infinity to +6, but then there's this break. When you have a break in your domain, when you are answering any kind of question like this, you're going to use the union symbol. All that means is that it's including two sets of intervals in a sense. So my function is negative, and I'm going to need to write over here -infinity to -6 union, oops, I apologize, I forgot my little inequality, union 6 to +infinity. Editing it. So for our recap, zeros, maximum, and minimums are points. Make sure to read closely if they're asking for points or values when dealing with maximum or minimums. With increasing or decreasing functions, think about the slope. If it's going up from left to right or down from left to right. Maximum and minimum values will be in your interval solutions. Also, positive or negative intervals, use the x-axis. The x-axis is what splits the coordinate plane into positive or negative y values. The zeros will be in your solutions. Well, I hope you had a good time getting mathy with me. I will see you tomorrow and we'll practice this together. Take care.